We are back, and I have something special in store for you guys. One of these things. What we have here is an Alienware Alpha R1 mini gaming PC from around 2014. This was kind of an interesting time in PC gaming. Basically around that time, Valve was showing off quote-unquote Steam machines. It was basically a way for them to market gaming PCs for your living room. The idea around a lot of these mini gaming PCs at the time was, why would you buy a PlayStation 4 or an Xbox One when you could just buy a PC that's the same size and have a way better gaming experience? It was an interesting idea on paper, although it didn't quite last in the market. So yeah, the Alpha in the Alienware line of gaming PCs is definitely interesting. This right here is the first generation one. Again, it came out in 2014. It comes equipped with a 4th generation Intel Core processor. It originally had 8 gigabytes of RAM, and I fully upgraded it to 16. It originally had either a 500 or 750 gig laptop style hard drive. I replaced that with a 1 terabyte SSD. And it has a semi-custom NVIDIA GeForce GTX graphics chip, which is kind of similar to the GTX 860M. And then 2 years later, they released the R2 second generation Alpha PC. That came equipped with a 6th gen Intel Core processor, and it also had either an AMD like R7 graphics chip or a GTX 960. After that, unfortunately, Alienware wasn't really interested in making another mini gaming PC, which is kind of a shame because honestly, it's a really, really good idea. I love having the idea of a mini gaming PC that is small enough to fit in your living room and powerful enough to be on par with a regular sized gaming PC. The Alpha R1 was pretty capable back when it released in 2014, but 10 years later in 2024, is that still the case? Let's find out. So for our specs, like I said before, it's a 4th gen Intel Core processor. This one in particular, I put in an i7-4785T clocked at 2.2 gigahertz. That is basically the most powerful processor that you could probably put in this thing. Unfortunately, with its small size, going with a regular i7 would definitely be a problem thermal-wise. So it's best to stick with either an S processor or one of these T processors. And then we have the maximum amount of memory of 16 gigabytes. We've got Windows 10. This thing originally shipped with Windows 8.1. We've got a 1 terabyte SATA SSD. And we've got our NVIDIA GeForce 860M. So on paper, it seems like a pretty capable system. But you got to keep in mind, this is 2014 hardware that we're dealing with here. And it's 2024. And there's even some newer titles that struggle a little bit on my main gaming PC. So I can only imagine how this thing is going to go. So I've got a few games in my Steam library that we're going to check out, ranging from simple 2D titles up to really graphically demanding titles. So let's see what this thing can do. Let's start things with some synthetic benchmarks. So I've got a couple here from 3D Mark. Obviously, the more demanding ones, like ray tracing, for example, is an absolute no-go on this thing, which, duh, of course. But it looks like majority of these other tests will at least run on this thing. So let's start with Night Raid. So we're just going to run this thing under the default settings and see how it does. So it looks like we scored 12,648 on the Night Raid demo. Not too shabby. Obviously, our lowest score is most definitely our CPU, which, yeah, I definitely expected that. even though it's a 4th gen i7, it's still an old CPU and is definitely long in the tooth. I do feel like it would definitely help out if the chip had a higher clock speed, but unfortunately, from what I'm seeing here, the highest we got to was about like 3.1 gigahertz, which I'm guessing that's probably the max that this thing can go under turbo boost. On wildlife, we scored 8,372. Again, pretty good. I'd say frame rates were all right. We definitely saw peaks of over 60 FPS, but majority of the time we were sitting around the 50s and mid to low 40s, but still very playable. In Wildlife Extreme, we got 2,374 points, which is definitely not surprising. This test was running in 4K, and for majority of the time, the frame rate was definitely like in the teens. So yeah, not great. On Firestrike, we got 3,785 points. A little better, but still definitely not great. In Firestrike Extreme, we got 1,887 points. Definitely our lowest so far. I believe this one was also running in 4K. And yeah, the frame rates definitely reflect that. For majority of the time, we were sitting in the single digits. And the combined test was by far the worst one. We got like 3-4 FPS. So yeah, this thing cannot do Firestrike Extreme, to say the least. Do we dare try Firestrike Ultra? It says your hardware may not be compatible. Screw it. Let's do it anyway. Let's really push this thing to its limits. Wow, that is bad. Yup, it handles it exactly as I expected. Oh yeah, we're fully into slideshow territory here, people. Oh, this is just sad. Let's see if it crashes here. I have a feeling it's not going to be able to finish this test. Wow, the fact that it actually started this test surprises me. And yeah, 2 FPS. In Firestrike Ultra, we got 745 points. Wow. Yeah, that is... I have no comment. Playable frame rates? Yeah, forget about it. The lowest we saw was even like 1 FPS. So yeah, this thing was struggling hard in that test. Looks like we scored 1,273 points on Time Spy. Yeah, exactly as I expected. Pretty much single digits across the board. No surprise. This isn't even gameplay anymore. This is like if I just mashed the screenshot button over and over and over again. Oh yeah, that's bad. Slideshow territory. Hang in there, buddy. You can do this. Power through it. I don't know if you can hear that or not, but like the CPU fan is roaring right now.
Help me, 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 help me.
Come on, buddy. You can do it. Come on, you're almost done with the test. It's all over. Oh, I'm afraid to see. Oh my god. In Time Spy Extreme, we got our lowest score yet. We got 358. And mind you, this is running in 4K on DirectX 12. So yeah, of course this thing is not going to handle it at all. It struggled especially during that CPU test. Although, surprisingly, it was still able to keep itself cool. It was hovering around like high 60s, low 70s. So that's not too bad. Unfortunately, that's pretty much all we got with the graphical tests because these other ones are for DirectX 12 Ultimate as well as ray tracing, which, yeah, of course, this thing is not going to be able to do ray tracing at all. Those benchmarks were definitely not promising, but synthetic benchmarks only tell part of the story. We have to get into actual gameplay to really see what this thing is capable of. Let's start with the simplest title with Speedrunners. Absolutely love this game. This is one of my favorite indie games. No surprise, this game is a breeze on the Alienware. We're locked at a buttery smooth 60 FPS, so I didn't have any doubts that it wouldn't have been able to run a game like this. I'm usually better at this game, trust me. Let's move on to Turok. This is the remastered version re-released by Night Dive Studios. We're running everything at the highest settings, and let's see how it does. Oh yeah, no surprise. Buttery smooth 60 FPS. Ah, dinosaur! You're no match for the mighty Turok. Hey! Oh crap, I'm gonna die. We better call it here before I die and embarrass myself. Just because we can, and also because I have a feeling I'm probably going to get a comment requesting this, let's see if it'll run Crysis. Now, mind you, this is the original 2007 release. This is not the remastered version. And yeah, so far, it runs perfectly fine. I wish I was on a daytime level because you can't really see anything. Let's see what settings that we're running at, actually. So, let's see. I probably should have looked at this before I started recording. Okay. Yeah, it looks like we're only running at 1024 by 768. Let's increase that resolution. We'll leave anti-aliasing on 2x. Looks like everything is on high. How about very high? Honestly, even with everything maxed out, it's actually not too bad. Obviously, now it's no longer running at 60 FPS, but yeah, we're hovering in like the 40s and 30s. Yeah, I'd be perfectly fine playing this game that way. We might see the game start to lag a little bit in like heavy firefights, but just running around on the island like this, yeah, it's completely fine. Hang on, I want to see if I can get to the point where we are on the beach and see if this thing lags or not. Ooh, I think we're coming up to the beach. All right, let's see if our frame rates drop. Nope. Still perfectly playable. Oh, well, except when we zoom in with our binoculars, then it kind of lags a little bit, but yeah. So to answer that question, yes, this thing can run Crysis. Next we have Cyberhook. Let's see how this runs. This is actually a surprisingly fun game. And yeah, no surprise, runs perfectly fine on this thing. Even at the, I think we're running at the max settings. Yep, looks like we are. And it runs perfectly fine. Woo-wee! Oh boy. I'm not very good at this game. Next, let's see how the Alienware Alpha plays Black Mesa. So, let's check our video settings. So we've got a mixture of high and ultra settings. That seems to be the sweet spot with this thing. And yeah, no surprise. At this point, it runs perfectly fine. Ha! Not so tough now, huh? They honestly did a really, really good job with this Half-Life remake. Really fun. With VSync turned off, we're getting upwards of like 140 FPS. So, yeah, if that tells you anything, this game plays Black Mesa perfectly. All right, let's see how this thing does with an online game like Vampires the Masquerade Blood Hunt. So, right now, I have the game running basically at the lowest settings. So, literally everything, well, besides texture filtering, is at the bare minimum. And then we're at the lowest playable resolution of 720p. It does go lower, although not by much. The lowest we can go is 1024 by 768, but it does not look pretty, and it's kind of hard to play that way. So this is pretty much as low as we can go while still being playable. And yeah, just walking around here in the lobby, we're getting a solid like 60 FPS. Not too bad. And honestly, even with the game running at the lowest settings, it doesn't look too bad. As long as you have some sort of texture filtering. Otherwise, everything just looks like a pixelated mess. Also, I just realized that we're recording in 30 FPS, so that's probably not the best way to show this all off. So, yeah, blame me on that one. So I'm going to quickly switch to 60 FPS, and you'll be able to better see the frame rates. Yeah, that's much better. Let's play as... Oh, I guess we don't have a choice. I guess we have to go with the Enforcer. Fine. There's a few dips here and there. I'm seeing dips into like 58, 59 FPS, but if I'm really being honest, I can't notice it at all. I can only tell just from the built-in Steam FPS counter. Yeah, this is perfectly playable. The only thing that I do notice a little bit is some stuttering here and there, especially when it's like loading in assets or when there's a lot of action going on. But other than that, it's, yeah, completely fine. If this was all that I had, I would be perfectly fine playing the game like this. Come back here. Fight me like a vampire. Yeah, I'm not very good at this game. Okay, let's go up here. Oh, I saw a little bit of a dip there. It went down to like 50 FPS. Still very playable, at least in my eyes. Next, we're going to try some Halo Infinite. It did pop up an error when I first launched the game saying something about incompatibility with DirectX 12, yada, yada, yada. But, well, as you can see, it still started up, so that's a good sign. Not entirely sure what that error was all about, but hopefully it still means the game is playable. But we shall see. It's taken an awfully long time to load, though. Like, even when I played this game on Xbox One, it loaded faster than this. Oh no! Dang it. It crashed. It crashed on the loading screen. Oh, please. Yeah, that was the error I was getting earlier. Could not find compatible graphics device due to the following missing features. Hardware tiled resources tier 2, whatever that is. And yet the game still starts. Kind of weird. Oh no. It's even worse now. It crashes at the splash screen. So, I guess that means Halo Infinite is not going to be possible on this thing at all. Oh well, it was worth a try. Next, we have Industria. Actually, a really good game. Um, so we're running at 1080p, and pretty much everything except the shadows, which let's take that down to low. So yeah, everything is on low at 1080p. So And it looks like we're running at 65% resolution scaling. Let's bring that up to 100% and see if it can handle. Oh no, I'm already seeing the frame rate tank. Maybe let's try 900p instead. Oh no. I mean, the frame rate is fine, but I'm seeing a lot of stuttering. I don't know if you can see that, but it's pretty noticeable on my end. Maybe let's take the resolution down. Let's try 720p instead. That made no difference whatsoever. Huh. Okay, fine. We'll turn down the resolution scaling. Let's try 75% of 720p. Well, that's a little better. Okay. So if you're willing to pretty much take the game all the way down to the lowest settings and then some, I'd say it's all right. Looks like in an area like this, it hovers around the 50 FPS mark. And then when there's a lot of stuff in the background, like in that intro section over there, I saw that it dropped down to like the 30s. I mean, overall, I'd say it's still relatively playable. Because I'm curious, what happens if you take the resolution scaling all the way down to the minimum? Oh my god. It looks like a PlayStation 1 game. I mean, it's running at a perfect 60 FPS now. It just looks awful. Bright Memory Infinite is another graphically intensive game. So let's see how it plays on the Alienware Alpha. So let's look at our settings. I don't know exactly what settings we're running at. So let me see. So we're at 720p right now. Let's see what happens if we jump up to 1080p. Oh yeah, that's definitely affecting our frame rate. We're sitting at like the 20s and 30s even on the menu. So yeah, I think we need to stick with 720p. Let's leave everything on default for now and just see how it handles that. Okay, it's not too bad. At the default settings, we're at about like 45, 40 FPS at minimum. That's still relatively playable. And if I'm really being honest, even running at 720p, I'd say the game still looks pretty good. Oh, I don't think I was supposed to do it that way, but that works. Because we can, I want to see how it does with the highest settings. So everything's set to high. Okay, so that affected our frame rate a little bit. Now we're dipping into like the 30s and 40s. But if I'm being honest, that's actually kind of impressive that it's able to handle that. I mean, there's a few stutters here and there, but yeah, if this was all that I had, or if this was the only way I could play the game, I'd be perfectly happy with this. Now, we could probably get a steady 60 FPS if we dropped the settings all the way down, which let's actually do that. Oh, never mind. I was talking out of my ass. Apparently, you can't get a steady 60 FPS even with lowest settings. So we have a bottleneck somewhere. But like I said, it's still relatively playable. So now we're going to try Tiny Tina's Wonderlands and see how this runs. Of course, we got to wait for the game to optimize shaders. I always hate this part. So we're running at DirectX 12. We'll keep it at that for now and see how it handles that. Limited frame rate, we'll do a cap at 60 if we'll even be able to reach that. Graphics quality low. Let's bring that up a little bit. Let's try, oh, whoops. Let's try medium. And look at that, the game even has a built-in benchmark. Perfect. So right off the bat at medium settings, just with this benchmark, it's not looking the best. It looks like we're capping out at about like 23, 24 FPS, and also the game is really stuttery. Kind of reminds me of how the game played on my wife's PS4 when we first played this game together. Yeah, it did not run very well on that at all. I mean, even though our frame rate is not the best, it's consistent at least, so that's something. Let's try running that benchmark again, but with everything set to low. Actually, you know what? Screw it, let's go all the way down to very low. Oh yeah, that's already looking much better. The game looks a little worse, but at least we're actually getting over 30 FPS. And the battle sequence also looks much better. It's actually playable now. We're still not quite reaching 60 FPS though. Let's see what it takes to get a constant 60 FPS. So we'll keep everything at very low, and then we want to definitely adjust that resolution. So let's go all the way down to 720p and see if that improves things. Hey, look at that. We're sitting a little bit below 60 FPS, but yeah, that's the closest we've gotten so far. At 720p in very low settings. Yeah, 60 FPS, or at least pretty damn close to it, is definitely possible on this thing. Yeah, from what I'm seeing here, the game is hovering at around like 50 or so most of the time. That's our best one yet. So if you want to play Wonderlands at the bare minimum settings, you can do it. Ghost Runner is up next, so let's see what settings that we're running at right now. Looks like everything is set to medium. A couple things are set to high. We'll just leave everything at the default and see how that goes. I originally played this game on Xbox One, and it was a complete stuttery mess. Do not play it on 8th gen consoles. It does not play well on there. But on here, honestly, it's not too bad. There's a couple stutters here and there, but for the most part, I'm seeing a pretty steady 60 FPS. Let's see what happens if we bring everything up to the max settings just to see what happens. I haven't even applied the settings yet, and the Alienware is already roaring like a jet engine. Well, that's a lot better than I was expecting, that's for sure. We're definitely not at 60 FPS anymore. It looks like we're sitting at about 30 to 35 most of the time, which I'd still say that's for the most part playable for a game like this. I would most definitely prefer 60 FPS, but I'm surprised this game actually runs at the max settings on this thing. Ghost Runner 2, on the other hand, is a different story. So, as you can probably already tell, we're pretty much running at the lowest settings by default. So we're at 720p, 50% resolution scaling. Yeah, pretty much everything set to low except anti-aliasing. Let's just turn that down to low. We'll keep everything to low because I have a feeling it's not going to be able to handle any higher than that. And we'll try 1080p internally and just see how good or how bad it is. I'm pretty late into the game, so I'm in the outdoor section, and yeah, that is not great at all. Ooh, that is rough. I'd imagine the game would be a little bit better in the indoor sections, but not out in the open world. Let's bring that resolution back down to 720p. Leave everything at the lowest settings. And see if that improves anything. A little bit, but not by much at all. Ooh, that is still rough. Yeah. I would definitely not play the game this way. Let's bring the resolution scaling down to where it was before when we started up the game. 50%? Sure, why not? See if that gives us better... Oh! There we go. Oh yeah. That's much better. It's like perfectly playable now. Obviously, it looks like complete ass. But, oh wait, never mind. Forget I said anything. It's still lagging quite a bit. I mean, it's better. I still would not like to play the game like this. But, I mean, if you were really desperate enough and this was the only way you could play the game, I guess you could get by with it. It's still definitely not going to be the best experience in the world. For the hell of it, let's turn the resolution scaling all the way down. So at 10% of 720p, we'd be at 127 by 71. Let's see how that works. Oh my god. I can't even make out any details whatsoever. But yeah, it's running perfectly fine now. I don't see any dips whatsoever. But yeah, you can't make out any details whatsoever. No one should ever have to bring a game down to that level of settings in order to get playable 60 FPS. Oh, this poor thing. Mind you, this game came out in 2023, and this is the newest game that we've tried on this thing. And yeah, it's a no-go. I just want to see what happens if we bring everything up to the highest settings and see what happens. I have a feeling it's probably going to crash on me, but we're going to do it anyway. Oh my god. We're at single digits now. If you thought that resolution scaling down to the minimum was unplayable, try playing the game like this. I dare you. Oh my god. Oh my god, that is like actually making me sick. Okay, no. We gotta stop with that. So, can you game on a 10-year-old Alienware PC? Well, I mean, it handles older titles and lighter titles perfectly fine. Although for later titles, and especially those graphically demanding ones, if you can get by with turning it down to the lowest settings and get a playable frame rate, it's good enough, I'd say. Although for games like Ghost Runner 2, yeah, absolutely not. But we're not quite done. There's one more thing I want to show. You see, I wasn't just using this thing as my living room gaming PC. I found out that this thing may have potential as a really, really good emulation station. So I've got some emulators as well as some ROMs loaded up on this thing, and we're going to see how it handles it. Let's start with original PlayStation, which, no surprise, yeah, it is an absolute breeze for this thing. Right now we're running at pretty much bog standard default settings on RetroArch, although I'd imagine you could probably get away with some resolution upscaling on PlayStation games perfectly fine. Sega Saturn games also run pretty well on this thing. Now, of course, it's probably not going to be perfect because really, no matter what system that you run Sega Saturn games on, they can be a little tricky to emulate. But from the ones that I've tried on here, even at default settings, they work surprisingly well on. There may be some instances where it's not perfect, mainly because, well, Sega Saturn games are notoriously difficult to emulate, but even on this thing, I'd say it's more than playable. You may be able to get away with some upscaling. I haven't tried that because, like I said before, Sega Saturn games can be a little difficult to emulate, and even on this thing, even though the game is running perfectly fine, I am having some audio stuttering issues. Like that. But yeah, honestly, not too bad. Sega Dreamcast games also run really well in the Alienware Alpha. Just like with the Saturn games, there may be a couple of audio/visual glitches here and there, but overall, it is surprisingly playable. Nintendo 64, no surprise, is pretty much flawless. Like in Smash Bros, for example, yeah, it's running at a perfect 60 FPS, the exact same way as it did on the original Nintendo 64. Atari Jaguar can be hit or miss, but I can't really blame the Alienware Alpha for that. Atari Jaguar emulation is still kind of hit or miss no matter what system you run it on. Like, obviously, we've got some audio issues, but besides that, doesn't run too bad. Wii emulation is also not too bad. There are some like little stutters and graphical glitches here and there. That might just be, at least with the stutters, that might just be my USB flash drive that I'm running these ROMs off of. But yeah, in terms of just general gameplay, it it runs really, really well, and also looks pretty good too. And I was even able to pair up my actual Wii Remote to the Alienware Alpha using Bluetooth. And of course, no surprise, it works flawlessly. This may not be a great gaming PC in 2024, but if you're using it as like a media center or even an emulation system, it actually works surprisingly well. And also, not to mention just general basic usability is still really, really good. I can easily browse the web on this thing, no problem. It can handle HD video. I think it also technically can handle 4K video, although with this specific model, the R1, it only allows 4K 30 FPS. But still, if you can get it to work, it'll do it. So I hope you all enjoyed this random endeavor, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye, Alienware.